around December, I heard Rafiel was coming out of retirement.
He was fighting one of his old students. It was a vendetta.
And I went out there to film him, and I saw all the techniques he was doing, and I couldn't help but notice as he was doing them that they were sloppy. That's a generous way of saying it.
This is what I shot for King of the Cage right before Rafiel's fight. This is him hitting the pads.
Oh, wow.
This is knee bar setup.
That is the worst thing I've ever seen. He left his leg on the inside of the knee bar. That's terrible. Yeah. So we know right then.
I want to strike a lot, but I would like to submit him. I would definitely like to submit him, but I'd like to hurt him first.
When the Ultimate Fighting Championship first debuted in 1993, it achieved an unprecedented amount of success for a pay-per-view exclusive event. Although frequently criticized by the media for its perceived excessive violence, the promotion was able to flourish early on because so many people were just curious to see what all the damn hype was about. This initial success sparked a fad period for no-holds-barred fighting in general, with numerous copycat events such as the World Combat Championships and Battlecade Extreme Fighting vying to usurp the UFC as the white-knuckle event of bare-knuckle combat. For a fleeting moment, it appeared to some people that mixed martial arts might actually become a major sport in the United States. As the decade wore on, however, it quickly became apparent that MMA still had a ways to go before it could break into the mainstream. By the denouement of the 20th century, politicians looking to trick their voters into thinking they were accomplishing something worthwhile were able to bully many major pay-per-view providers into dropping the UFC and other no-holds-barred events. With the sport now essentially pushed into the dark, most casual fans just shrugged their shoulders and moved on with their lives, assuming that Ultimate Fighting had just been a mid-90s fad that had run its course. This left only the absolute most hardcore and passionate fighting buffs as the people keeping MMA alive in America. With the internet as their only means of following the sport, the fans during this bleak era of MMA were dedicated, knowledgeable, and very tight-knit, but still nonetheless not immune to charlatanism. Californian Rafiel Torre initially schmoozed his way into the online MMA community by boasting about a 14-0 record he supposedly had in underground pit fighting tournaments. Despite his lack of proof that these bouts occurred, a lot of people bought his story. Up until this point in the 90s, American MMA as a whole was a pretty unpolished and sloppily run operation, even back when the business was still making money. There are some UFC fights that are still unseen to this day because Semaphore Entertainment Group either didn't film them or didn't feel like editing them onto a VHS tape. On a lower level, it wasn't entirely uncommon for professional promotions to hold shows in middle school gymnasiums or the backs of gyms just on the mats without any rings to contain the action. The idea that a dude could have 14 fights that nobody saw or recorded was not that hard to believe. Once he had the fighting community's attention, he began to dazzle them with yarns about himself and his background. Claiming to be an ex-Navy SEAL with a Brazilian father who trained him in jiu-jitsu since he was a child, Torre would thoroughly impress both the MMA world and even some mainstream newspapers with tales of his underground fighting adventures. So popular he became that he would actually catch the attention of Arab Sheikh Tahnoun bin Zayed Al Nahyan and earn himself an invitation to the inaugural Abu Dhabi Combat Club World Championships in 1998, the event that kicked off the modern era of submission grappling. Although Torre would end up getting his pitiful ass kicked in under a minute by the eventual bronze medalist in the light heavyweight class, Bo Hirschberger, his credibility in the MMA world surprisingly did not diminish much. Becoming a news writer and broadcaster for the fledgling sport, he would be a mainstay in the fighting community for years. In 2001, while still working as a journalist, Torre would make the inexplicable decision to come out of retirement and actually fight in a professional MMA bout. The story was that he had some kind of beef with a former student of his, heavyweight Ioka Tainu, and that they wanted to settle the score in the ring. Meeting in King of the Cage 7, Wet and Wild, an event so named because it was held outside with no tent during a rainstorm, Torre would end up winning by knee bar after his former pupil appeared to deliberately feed him his leg. In one fell swoop, the supposed ex-underground fighter's credibility dive-bombed harder than Enron stocks, as people speculated whether or not he had paid his opponent to take a dive.
We're here with Rafiel, Torre. Rafiel, now is the grudge put to rest?
Yes, it's totally done. He hit me hard, and I got him back a little bit too, so I think we're even.
Okay, so now, are you going to continue in mixed martial arts, or will you now retire again?
Hell no, these young guys coming up hit too damn hard, they're too fast, they train too much, I'm too old.
Torre probably assumed having a bout in a modern legitimate MMA promotion would aid the elaborate facade of toughness he constructed around himself, but in the end he only succeeded in obliterating his entire reputation. After the Tainu fight, his lies began to rapidly unravel, and the truth finally started coming out. The 14 underground fights he claimed he had never really happened. He didn't have an extensive pedigree of training. He wasn't an ex-Navy SEAL, and hell, he wasn't even Brazilian. It turned out his real name was Ralph Bartle. After all this shit came to light, the dude naturally disappeared from the MMA scene faster than a cheetah with a firecracker up his ass. The story does not end there, though. Later on, after supposedly meeting a woman named Angelina Richards during an orgy, Torre decided that he was in love and hatched a ploy to murder her husband so the two could elope and live happily ever after off the man's life insurance policy. Initially, Torre contacted ex-Marine and UFC fighter Gerald Strabent to do the deed for $10,000, but the lightweight jiu-jitsu expert turned down the offer. With no recourse left, Torre decided to just execute the 32-year-old Brian Richards himself. How? Well, not with a gun, not with a knife, not with radiation, but rather with a rear-naked choke. After getting the tap from Richards and cleverly hiding his body right in the middle of a supermarket parking lot, Torre would next attempt to initiate the cover-up phase of his ingenious murder plot. Contacting Gerald Strabent again, he tried to convince the UFC fighter to provide him with an alibi, claiming he was forced to kill Richards in self-defense. Having been previously offered $10,000 by Torre to commit this very murder, Strabent was naturally quite suspicious about this whole situation. The events from here on out proceed more or less how you would expect. In 2005, after extensive testimony from Strabent, Torre was convicted to life imprisonment for the murder of Brian Richards. As of 2017, the entirety of his incarceration has been spent being raped in his cell by Dan Severn. Overall, I think there are two big takeaways we can glean from this story. Number one, even savvy, knowledgeable people can still be fooled by a bullshit artist in the right circumstances. And number two, people who deceive and manipulate others for a living should always be approached with caution. When we're talking about a pasty-faced goofball like Ashita Kim, it might seem like most of these frauds are just harmless retards. But the truth of the matter is that they can all be potentially dangerous. When a person is willing to do shitty, unscrupulous things for his own benefit, you can never really guess the limits of what he's truly capable of.